With Bruce Bowen, I'm Israel Gutierrez. We had a couple of teams take a 2-0 lead last night. Let's start with the Heat and the Nets.
They're a good defensive team that really can catch you in their web, and Ray was playing with a great motor. We were probably getting our best actions off of him running around. You know, the threes that he was getting, or loosen up the defense from there. A veteran guy, been in these moments. He had a sense for it, a feel for it, what we needed.
That was Heat coach Eric Spoelstra talking about the Brooklyn Web, which is now 2 games now where they tried to talk about Brooklyn and their style and how they trap you in a web. But they escaped in large part because of Ray Allen's motor, which got him 13 points. Glad he turned that engine over. He had 13 points, 8 rebounds, and 2 assists, a steal and a block. Man, Ray Allen did everything last night at 38 years old. Bruce, what's you watch these guys play, and LeBron did what he normally does. Dwayne Wade had a good fourth quarter. Chris Bosh was in there with 18 and 6 and had 3 really impressive blocks, actually. But I think the most impressive thing in this series so far has been 19 points and then 13 points out of Ray Allen, not just because he's the a fourth guy on this team or he's another option, but because he's 38 years old, because just his presence on the floor to this day draws defense and attracts defense and makes offense seem so much easier when they all have to put, all eyes on that guy. Like, how is it that this guy can still do this at 38 years old? It's really hard to fathom.
Well, it's hard to fathom because you can't do it like he can, and that's shoot the rock.
I'm not 38 yet, though.
I know, but you still can't shoot the rock like he can at 38.
You don't know. You don't know. You haven't seen me shoot it. But no, you're right.
That is true. But that's the whole deal right there, is that he has an ability, even at 38. Take away the age, just the fact that he can still knock down shots. This isn't a person that you look at and say, well, he may hit it and he may not. He puts so much work and effort into his craft. And his craft, number one, is spreading the floor. And that allows the Miami Heat to be special. It allows LeBron James and Dwayne Wade to have gaps to drive. Because with him on the floor and you having to be aware of him, as far as him coming off double screens or anything like that, the defense has to respect wherever he is on the floor. And just that little ounce of worrying about Ray Allen at a certain time or a particular moment, it gives LeBron an opportunity. It gives Dwayne an opportunity. What I love most yesterday is the fact that he was moving. And that's something that guys get stuck. They get stuck into, okay, I'm going to shoot this 3-ball and that's that. We've seen the way he sets up his 3-ball with a shot fake and then he'll drive to the basket. And even at his age of 38, he's still able to get there. And it surprises so many, but it starts with the ability that he can shoot the 3-ball, and he's a very good shooter. So for him to realize, especially right now, how important it is for him to do his job, that only enables the Miami Heat to be more efficient on the offensive end.
Well, it's kind of nuts when you think about it, because here he was, during the regular season he shot 37.5% from 3. And basically in the last 15 years, it's the second worst percentage he's had from 3-point range. And there was a lot of, conjecture. There was a lot of people wondering if if the age had caught up to him and that if he was not going to be able to be relied upon in the postseason. Like his Game 6 saving 3 was like a last gasp for Ray, and all of a sudden, he's got nothing left to offer. And yet here he is in the postseason doing this. Now, he didn't have a great first round. Against Charlotte, he made a total of 5 threes in 4 games, and he had 4 of them in that first game and then added a few more last night. So, it's amazing to see so far him shooting 43.5% from 3 in these playoffs. Well, I was captivated when he was talking about, with a couple of guys who actually worked with the Heat, about his ability to know when to be able to shoot coming off of a screen, even when the help defender is there, just based on how the guy is coming to help, whether he's coming out as if you were going to drive or he's coming out as if you're going to shoot. If he, for a split second, acts as if he's protecting the drive, you can see that before you even catch the ball, and he rises up and shoots it because he's got, he sees the defense and he's got that ability. And LeBron actually talked about after the game how just his presence alone encourages ball movement.
one thing we can't take for granted is Ray's ability to attract defense. With Ray, you can shift the defense without moving the ball because him coming off pin downs, him coming off wide screens, it really attracts so many guys. And, it's big time for our team to have that trigger.
How, Bruce, by the way, Ray does get away with a little bit of a walk sometimes when he catches it off the screen and takes 3 steps and then shoots it. But apparently he's been granted that, Jesus status and all. But if it was you, Bruce, how do you defend him coming off screens while still, not paying too much attention to where everybody else has, wide open shots or lanes to the basket? Like, what do you do to defend that defense that starts with, the scary action of Ray Allen coming off screens?
Well, number one is you have to be physical with him, Izzy. And you can't give him a decision on which way to go, which screens to use, or which screens to utilize as far as coming off of a double. I remember when he was in Seattle and we were playing in the playoffs, I got a healthy dose of that. But I knew that Ray was much more reluctant to come off a pin down going left as he was right then. So because, if he goes up to shoot coming off the left, he's turning right into the defense and it's easier to block a shot that way. So I would always try to influence him to the best of my ability to get to a spot where it's really, taking him away from one of his strings. Now, I didn't say he couldn't do that coming off the left pin down. But
I was about to ask you how that worked out for you.
Yeah. Well, oh, man, hey, we won a championship that year, Chief. That's how it worked out for me. But, in those situations, you have to take something away. You can't just give Ray what he wants in that particular moment. So, you look at Brooklyn, it was Thornton on him. And once a shooter with the ability of Ray Allen, Reggie Miller, Glenn Rice, Allen Houston, once they get separation, Izzy, it's over. Because, there is 1 3 hit where it was so much separation and Thornton thought Darren Williams was going to switch. He didn't switch, and next thing you know, he knocks down a 3. You got to stay attached to shooters. You know that's the most important individual out there for that group at that particular moment as far as when he's coming off those screens. So it's important for you to do your work early and really try to limit what he does by being a little bit more physical with him. Ray doesn't like the physical part of the game. This I know. So you got to, especially at 38 years of age now, let's bump him a little bit. Let's get into him so that he's wrestling with me prior to trying to come off a screen.
Well, it's different even when you experienced it because he was better, yes, but he was also option number 1. Here, he's technically option 1 because he's starting the play, hoping to get open. But, if it ends up with LeBron driving or Dwayne Wade finding a crease or Chris Bosh with a wide open shot or, often, which does happen, this is another thing he was describing, when he plays with Chris Anderson on the floor, if you come off that screen as a help defender anticipating the shot, well, that's an easy dump down to the Birdman, and he will, or I'm sorry, Birdzilla, which is what he is these days, then that's a layup or a dunk or a foul. So it's got to be more frightening for a defense since he's been in Boston and Miami, because I remember in Miami, Spo used to talk about there's nothing scarier than an initial possession that starts with Ray coming off a bunch of screens because you have no idea how to defend that and guard against all that other action. So, it's got to be scarier when you're dealing with LeBron and Chris and Dwayne with him having his stroke going. So, it only makes sense, by the way, that the Heat in the first quarter on jump shots were 2 for 12 for 5 points. And then in the second through fourth quarter, which you see a lot more Ray Allen, they had 43 points and shot 53% on jump shots, including 10 for 16 on catch and shoots. So that's a tribute to Ray and his ability to make an impact at this time of year. And, I talked to Rashard Lewis about it, and he basically says not that Ray saves himself for this time of year, but he definitely focuses in this time of year on his body, even more on his jumper and on his energy. The energy to have to go through all those screens and run around like that at 38 is pretty impressive. But there's a flip side to this, and that was the Brooklyn Nets. And, Bruce, Darren Williams, once upon a time, was supposed to be a franchise point guard, and now he's only that about every third or fourth game. He doesn't have the consistency you would hope for from a guy that we thought was on par with Chris Paul early in his career. Last night he goes scoreless just for the third time in his career, but it was probably the worst game in his career flat out, because the other 2 times he went scoreless, he played a total of 22 minutes and took only 2 shots. This time he was 0 for 9. He played 37 minutes, and they needed, Spoelstra said before the game, I heard him in an interview with the radio guy basically saying, we know he's going to be more aggressive, and they're going to probably, force him to look to get to the rim and create some double teams that way. And open shots for others, and it wasn't really there. And Norris Cole, I remember there was one possession in particular where I'm looking at Brooklyn, and they have Darren Williams defended by Norris Cole, and then there was Rashard Lewis on the floor, there was Ray Allen on the floor, Dwayne Wade on the floor, who hadn't been particularly good defensively to that point, and then a big man, I forget who it was, I think it was Chris Anderson. And Brooklyn, rather than go to any of those other options against bad defenders like Ray or Rashard, or less quality defenders, he just lined up against Norris Cole, whose main strength is being able to stay on the ball. I mean, you remember him doing that to Tony Parker a couple of times. I don't get when they go to Darren Williams, but when they did go to him last night, it really didn't work out. And I'm wondering if he, what is this like? Just not forget about this series for a second. How murky is their future if it's built on a guy in Brook Lopez who can't stay healthy and a guy in Darren Williams who's not really who we thought he was?
Well, Izzy, I don't think it's that he's not who we thought he was. I think he's going through something that people go through. And it's rare that you see it from really talented individuals at the NBA level, a multiple All-Star, an Olympic gold medalist. And what you see right now is a confidence issue with Darren Williams. The fact that he's not 100% possibly. The fact that every time he gets out of bed, he rolls his ankle. These are situations that are really that's really paying a toll on him, I think, mentally than anything else, because I see him even more so now deferring out there on the floor. Okay, here you go, Joe. I remember a time where he would, if he hit 2 shots in a row, it's okay. We know what's coming next. So that's the biggest thing I see with him, and we've seen it with a lot of athletes today, Izzy, that some of them that have had huge playoffs last year, i.e., Roy Hibbert, but now it's Darren Williams, and I think it's more about the confidence, and we're not accustomed to seeing someone like Darren Williams lose any confidence, but I just look at the fact that with Norris Cole, whenever guys pressed up on Darren, he had that macho, that thing to go back at somebody. Oh, you're trying to guard me? Really? This is the same guy that took over games, for Brooklyn last year or for New Jersey the year before then. So it is still the same player, Izzy, but I think there's so much going on in his head right now that he's trying to find himself, and his confidence is down. And Izzy, that once you lose confidence at this level, it's really, really tough to get things back, especially in the midst of a series.
Well, I've never lost confidence in my life, so I really don't know what that feels like. Could you hear the lie as I was saying it? I'll say this, though. I mean, he needs to find it, because he's, next year he's making $20 million, the year after that 21, the year after that 22, and this is an expensive guy to have to be going through a crisis of confidence.
Excuse me, Izzy. I like the fact that you brought that up, Izzy, because this is the thing. Players will say things like, "Oh man, I don't read the papers. I don't care what people say." I mean, they had a missing report out on them, and the money underneath. This stuff is serious, man. He knows what he's going to make next year. He knows that, guys like Kobe Bryant get that kind of money, and he needs to prove that he's worth that money. So that's where I say, the more we talk about this, and you can even look at it even more so and say, wow, he's guaranteed this money over the next few years, and if this is what we see right now, what do we think is going to happen? He knows that as well. He's thinking about those things, but more than anything else, he should just stop thinking about all that other stuff and just play the game that we've seen him excel at.
You want to say, if you ever want to say wow for real, just take a look at the Brooklyn Nets salaries in general. Man, Joe Johnson, or as they call him, Ski Mask Joe, which I think is a little mean because he's actually still pretty good.
That is mean.
You know what? He is equal parts overpaid and underrated, if that makes any sense to you. Like, yeah, he makes a whole lot of money and people kill him for it, but they also don't recognize that when he's good, he's really, really good. And last night even, he was pretty good. I mean, he hit some contested shots last night, and you're starting to wonder, you're starting to think, man, this guy might go off. And really it ended up just being a decent night, 6 for 14 for 13 points. We get back to those Brooklyn Nets salaries. Joe Johnson next year, $23 million. Darren Williams, $20. Paul Pierce comes off the books, but not Kevin Garnett. He's still making $12 million next year. $12 million. The guy didn't even score in Game 1 against Miami. And Brook Lopez is 15 and 16. And I mean, this might be the most shocking one. Marcus Thornton is scheduled to make $8.7 million next year. Like, Marcus Thornton, wow. So I will say this about the Nets. They have one guy that's the best in the league at something. And Mirza Teletovic is the best in the league at immediate heat check, okay? This guy, he is a human heat check. Like, if he makes one, forget about it. The next one, if the ball's in his hands, you know he's going to take it. And if he makes two, it doesn't matter where he is on the floor, that ball's going to leave his hands within half a second. And yesterday, he made it seem like the Nets were hot from three, because I remember looking at the box score after the game, and I'm thinking, wait a second. They only hit 8 3-pointers. It felt like they hit way more than Miami, and Miami actually hit 10. But no, it was just because Mirza Teletovic hit 6, and Paul Pierce hit the other 2. But he hit 6 of 9, and he looked like he was about to, go off. And eventually Miami paid a little bit more attention to him. But that's what is supposed to keep the Nets in the game is their outside shooting. They have 5-6 guys who average 37% shooting from 3 or better. But it doesn't seem to be working, and I will take this back about Darren Williams. It might not have been the worst game of his career. I mean, he did have 6 assists and 7 rebounds. But what is it about Brooklyn what could they possibly go to next? Like, what's their next answer here? Because it doesn't seem to me, and I said this last time, they need to go more through Sean Livingston, because there were times last night where you just marveled at how long his arms are and how he can get his shot over anybody. Bruce, there was one possession where he was in the post or ended up in the paint, and he shot a ball over an outstretched, jumping Chris Bosh. And you're thinking, man, that's crazy. And you look at their arms, and they were about the same level. So other than go to him, or is he the best possible answer, where do you go if you're Brooklyn for more offense? Because it seems like Miami at least is going to score in the mid-90s. They're not going to get stuck in the 80s in this series.
No, and I don't think you necessarily go through Sean Livingston. You still utilize what he's able to do, and everyone else has to chip in too. This is the thing. We're talking about Darren Williams, who you mean to tell me he can't get 15 points? We're talking about Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, all these guys. It's important for these guys to really now say, hey, I got to do my part. Everybody has a responsibility on their team, and it's important for them to do that, because they have not lost these games where it's just other than game 1. I think yesterday that game was their style of game. It was slow. It wasn't a lot of transition baskets, but they couldn't stay with Ray Allen. I mean, Ray was the biggest difference in that game yesterday. They go into the fourth quarter, that it's a 2-point game. Then you have a possession where the Heat had the ball on offense for almost a minute and a half because they kept getting the second rebounds. That it was great for Miami, but it's one of those deals that it drives coaches crazy, because you saw so many, when shot goes up, only person that was active was Kevin Garnett. Then somebody comes in and get a rebound somewhere else. Everyone can participate in rebounding. Everyone can get in the paint. It's not designated for one person or two guys. Everyone can be involved. So when you have those things that you look at in film session, it doesn't necessarily make you press the panic button saying, oh, what can we do with Miami? They're just destroying us all over the place. The Nets have hope. They have hope. They have a lot of hope. But you got to play as well. You have to get involved. You have to move. You have to participate in your rescue. So I don't look at it so much as them having to really overload their game plan and what they've done, Izzy. I think they've had a solid game plan. but it's now about the production of the players that are on the floor.
You know, the reason I say it was a great possession was because, you know, rarely do you have a single possession that kind of defines a ball game or is a signature of a ball game, and that one was it, because it was 3 offensive rebounds by 3 different players, one by Bosch, one by Allen, one by Dwayne Wade. All the shots came from LeBron James. He missed 3 and then finally got the last one on a no-look pass from Dwayne under the basket. And it was exactly what the Heat had been talking about the entire game. These 50-50 balls, we're not getting them. That's what's going to decide this game. Those scrums under the paint, that's what's going to decide this game. And like you said, it was a 2-point game going into the fourth quarter, and they eventually started stretching it out, and that possession, a minute and 40 seconds, turned into 2 points that extended the lead to 10. So not only did they kill the clock successfully, but they sort of demoralized them by taking a double-figure lead late in the game. So that was sort of the signature possession of that game, and it's no surprise that it came with Dwayne Wade making a couple of crucial plays. Like I said, one of the tip-outs and the final dish to LeBron, because he had that mentality from the beginning. He started off 1 of 7 and said to himself, you know what, I'm not in a position where I can shoot my way out of a slump anymore or out of a poor shooting night because, A, I've got LeBron James next to me, and B, it's just not the way our offense should work. And so he said, I'm going to do the dirty work. I'm going to get in there and rebound. I'm going to find my teammates. I'm going to get a steal where I can. And then it just so happened that in the fourth he found some offense too and scored 8 of his 14. So he finishes with 14 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists, 2 steals, and a blocked shot in 35 minutes, and had a major impact on this game. Dwayne, his I guess evolution of his game hasn't really gone that noticed. But how do you see him? How different does he look as a player? From when he was in his prime, just 2008, to now, and how much of an effect can he still have on games?
Oh man, when he first got in, he had separation, and he played at a different pace. He's always been a deceptive guy, really quick to spots, and that's where he created that separation. He hit a shot yesterday that it was over someone, but I was just looking, I said, even though he made the shot, it's not necessarily a good shot, but that's what happens as, the pounding that he's taken on his body over the years is remarkable, that he's still even now able to play. I mean, people don't realize that all the fall and all the hits you take as a player like him, it's tough. It's tough as you get older, but, he's smarter in the standpoint of not just coming down and say, hey, give me the ball. It's through coming off of a screen, or he still utilizes the pick and roll where he turns it down really well because he stays low with his dribble. And then you still, at times, you get that explosion from Dwayne, and that's when you're like, whoa, there's a flash. So it's just more or less, it happens to everybody, Izzy. I just don't see the separation he used to get, whereas he would get by a premier defender. Now he's not getting by them, but he still has an advantage.
Yeah, there was one possession that sort of typified that yesterday where it was his first score in the fourth quarter. He had Teletovic on him, and normally he'd blow right by that guy, but rather than try to blow by him and fail, he just said, you know what, I'm going to back him down a little bit, and he backed down that barrel-chested Teletovic and ended up getting a little short shot in the paint because he's so strong, and he still has enough explosion down there. But, it's that post-up game that he's sort of perfected. He's, frankly, one of the best, most efficient post players in the league. So that's another area where his sort of game has evolved. But let's move on to the Spurs and the Trailblazers.
They know we can play better. The fact that we kept coming back in the second half, I'm not worried about that part of it. It's certainly frustrating to lose and to get blown out in game one and, not quite have enough in game two. But I know we'll be ready in game three.
That was Portland coach Terry Stotts, whose team lost the second quarter badly, and that's pretty much the story of that game. I got outscored 41-25 in the second, and all of a sudden, they go into the half, they're down 19, and, the Spurs rolled from there. I thought, Bruce, and you mentioned this before we started the podcast here, the versatility of the Spurs was on display last night. It wasn't just Tony Parker, who'd been in sort of a Game 7 mode since Game 7 and had been phenomenal, was phenomenal in Game 1. This time it was pretty much everybody doing damage, from Ginobili and Bellinelli off the bench to, Kawhi Leonard giving you 20 points and a couple of steals and a couple of blocks. What was it that impressed you the most in this game as opposed to, their run so far in these playoffs?
Well, it was definitely Kawhi Leonard. I mean, it was – I've said that sometimes he starts out a game on fire, and then you look at the box sheet afterwards, or the box score, and he only took 2 more shots. And it's like, where did Kawhi go? And so what you saw from Kawhi was an energized, motivated player last night. What you have is Greg Popovich really trying to develop him. He's talked about it for the longest that this young man is going to be a star in this game. And what people are starting to see now is the evolution of Kawhi Leonard. He was engaged yesterday. He was getting after it. And, I thought before he would rely too much on Tim, Tony, and Manu because they're future Hall of Famers. Doesn't want to ruffle their feathers. But in order for San Antonio to, I think, compete at a high level, they need Kawhi Leonard to be special. And I thought yesterday was one of the few nights in the playoffs in his career that he really, really took full advantage of the things that Greg Popovich has in store for him. So you saw it from his play, his first mid-game interview. It was hilarious to me because I know that he's a very quiet individual, and for him to do it, he just. Part of him wanted to get out of there, but another part wanted to say, hey, you know what? I guess this is a byproduct of what I have to do now when you're able to do the positive things out there on the floor. But, we talk about Bellinelli, who didn't have a good playoff series against Dallas. He seemed to have found his shooting stroke. And there are so many different situations out there where the ball movement was just crazy, Izzy. You get Tony penetrating the paint, and he shoot a shot and he missed, and he gets his own rebound and he kicks it to Kawhi in the corner. It was just like, you couldn't have drawn up a better way for the Spurs to move the ball yesterday, but let alone not only just moving the ball, but knocking down shots. I've talked about role players are so huge on teams because they have to do their job. If they're able to do their job, that allows the space to attack the gaps and things like that. And I have to say this. The unsung hero, though, in my opinion, is Tiago Splitter. I talked about this prior to this matchup. He's a guy that really matches up well with LaMarcus Aldridge. And we saw that effect, the fact that LaMarcus just doesn't have the freedom that he's had in the previous series, that it started to really affect him. So I think it's not just particular one individual for the Spurs, but it is a variety of guys, and it's the sharing of the basketball and the movement without the ball that allows them to get to these certain spots and knock down shots.
Hey, Bruce, were you at the game last night by chance?
No, I had my kids.
No, you were not.
I had to.
Okay.
I was.
I just wanted to make sure because I'm trying to go through a process of elimination to find out who it was that planted the snake in the in the Blazers locker room. Because for those who don't know, there was a snake discovered. I want to say it was Thomas Robinson's locker, but it was in one of the visiting lockers.
Yeah.
At what's that place called? Is it AT&T Center?
AT&T Center, man, the home of champions.
Yeah, the home of champions and probably terrible cell service, ironically. And, yeah, it was founded in Robinson's locker or in a visiting locker there. And at first the reports were it was a rattlesnake, and then the Spurs said it wasn't a rattlesnake, but they never said it wasn't poisonous, which would be scary either way, whether there's a rattle or not. And this I thought was a great quote from Terry Stotts, who said, "It's bizarre to have a venomous snake in your locker room." I think that's the understatement of the year. And then he said, "I don't know if it's happened before. That sounds like an ABA story." That sounds like a horrendous story regardless of where it when it happens or what league it happens in, but I know that would have thrown me off. I don't think that was the excuse the Portland Trailblazers had, however, so I'm curious what you think about this because, LaMarcus Aldridge didn't have a good shooting game. In fact, he was 6 of 23. It's pretty horrible. And that was, you mentioned Splitter defensively was great. But they had other guys contributing. They had Nicholas Batum in a good night, 9 for 13. Damian Lillard, 40% shooting, 19 points, not great, but okay. Wesley Matthews had a better game than he did. Had 14 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists. Problem was, again, with this team, if you don't get much off the bench from Mo Williams, which they didn't, you don't have any options really off the bench. Will Barton, 12 points. I don't even know who that is really. So, so it kind of makes you wonder if the Trailblazers have any options. Defensively, they can't seem to contain San Antonio, who shot 53%, and offensively, they don't seem to have an answer, despite having one of the most balanced starting fives in the league. So again, we asked this about Brooklyn. Now I got to ask you about the Blazers. What's their option? Where do they go from here? How can they possibly feel confident about winning a game in Portland, much less 2, to even this series up?
Well, it's hard to win in Portland, number one, Izzy. That crowd gets going, and they all play better in Portland. They play better at home. They're a young team, and sometimes when you have that backing of your crowd behind you, it allows you to play to another level. We know that LaMarcus Aldridge would be so much better at home. Same thing with Damian Lillard, but Nicholas Batum, he has to really stay that type of player he was yesterday. He was aggressive yesterday, and from the get-go, his first basket, it was a 2-dribble pull-up, and it's like, that's different from him. He didn't just kind of wait for the game to happen. He went and got the game, so to speak. And you have Wesley Matthews. You're absolutely right, Izzy, when you talk about the fact that they struggle so much with bench production. Mm-hmm. That's one of their weaknesses. And so they rely so much on their starters to give them those minutes and give them
that would
what
explain why that second quarter was as big of a blowout as it was, because that's a lot of bench players playing, and that would be the problem. I got to add this, Bruce. Didn't mean to cut you off there, but just because we mentioned Thiago Splitter and his defense against LaMarcus Aldridge, Game 2 against the defensive Splitter, LaMarcus only managed 4 points on 2 of 14 shooting, and inside of 10 feet was 1 of 8. So I think Houston did sort of open the door and let people know, hey, if you're going to guard LaMarcus, guard him with a big and be physical with him. And then I just want to sort of end this on this note, since I mentioned Mo Williams and his lack of production. He does have a groin injury. And, we mentioned the rattlesnake quote from Terry Stotts being an understatement. Well, this is Mo talking about his injury. He said, it's tough. You need your groin. That's true, Bruce. Like, you can't be more factually correct than that. You absolutely need your groin. And on that note, we will take a quick break. After we get back, we'll talk about 2 series that are more competitive so far than these first 2, and we'll get to those in a second.
Coming this summer, the 2014 FIFA World Cup from Brazil. Every goal.
The shot, Donovan scores! The USA leads by 2!
Every save.
Here's Germany up, steal, closer, in the box, the shot is stopped.
Every match. Wherever you are this summer, take the FIFA World Cup with you. It's on ESPN Radio and the ESPN Radio app.
I knew it was going to be a hard series. They have the MVP on their team now. They didn't have it at the beginning of the series, but now they do. I mean, Westbrook is, he gets criticized a lot, but I don't know why. The dude plays hard. He's tough. So we have a lot of capable players on our team, and it's going to be a good series.
That was Doc Rivers after his team lost 112-101 to the Oklahoma City Thunder in Game 2 to even that series at 1 apiece. Game 3 is tonight. Game 3 is in L.A. After the Clippers took home a court advantage, winning in Game 1. I don't hate to. That's a lie. I'm going to go ahead and pat ourselves on the back, Bruce, because we mentioned during the last podcast talking about this series about how much of an anomaly that first game was, given the way Durant and Westbrook actually played offensively, and how abnormal it is for that team to lose when they both shot 45% plus. And when that bench scored 30-plus points, and here you go, a similar game in terms of it was Westbrook and it was Durant, and those two guys shot well, and all of a sudden, look at that, they won the game 112-101. They did seem, however, more assertive They did play more desperate. Kevin, it showed up on offense where he was really aggressive in finding his shot and confident. I mean, confident shots, the type of shots he wasn't hitting against Memphis. And you could almost see the way when he rises up to take those shots, the difference in him. You know, against Memphis, it was almost like, oh, I got a shot, let me take this. Against the Clippers, it's, hey, I'm going to find this shot and I'm going to go up and hit it. And Russell, I thought his biggest difference in that second game was on the defensive end. I mean, he made Chris Paul work, even if it was as simple as coming off of the screen or chasing him off of a screen hard. Not only did that affect Chris Paul, it affected the screener. DeAndre Jordan got called for a couple offensive fouls on illegal screens because Russ was coming off so hard. So I'm wondering if you think that can continue in L.A. Like, which one is going to be more definitive in this series? Is it going to be Chris Paul's play, or is it going to be those two superstars finding a way, in Russell and Durant, finding a way to elevate their team?
No, I think the superstars are going to be who they are. It's the other guys. It's who is it Caron Butler that's going to have an impact on the game? You know, is it Adams? You know, and for that part, Kendrick Perkins, you know, Serge Ibaka. Those, we're not, because the superstars, they cancel one another out. And on the flip side, you know, will DeAndre Jordan stay on the floor? You know, will he get in foul trouble? Will J.J. Redick have a huge game? We know that, and I say the folks that cancel out one another, I think that Reggie Jackson and Jamal Crawford will cancel out one another. So it's like Big Baby. Will he contribute? Will he do something special within the role for that team? I think it's almost like, Izzy, you feel more comfortable going with the home team because they have the familiarity of being at home and also having the fans behind them.
Yeah, that's definitely one good area. I mean, when you talk about role players excelling, they usually do that at home under comfortable surroundings more so than they would on the road. Although JJ had a really good couple of games in Oklahoma City, but I guess his shot travels with him. But you mentioned Jamal Crawford and Reggie Jackson in that game too. They canceled each other out in the worst of ways. Jamal was 2 of 13 for 7 points and was terrible, and Reggie Jackson, barely saw the floor. 13 minutes, 2 of 5 for 4 points. But to me, I feel like this, as much as you can talk about the role players and everything else, it's so important for Durant and Westbrook to have huge games because, and we talked about this before, their offense is very vanilla. It's Russell, it's Durant, and then it's, hey, you guys create something. Or it's a simple pick and roll, or it's a simple post up, and then there's not really a whole lot of action besides that. So it just puts so much pressure on those two guys to perform. That's what makes them so good, is that, it's kind of like LeBron back in Cleveland, where you look at it and it's like, well, it's got to be LeBron because these other guys aren't going to do it for you. And he did it anyway. He got them to a finals against your team. With these two guys, it seemed for a while they were sort of in a muddy situation. They maybe weren't confident in their coach. It seemed like they were getting out-coached and they were getting outplayed by the other team's defense, and even offensively the other team executing better. Have they sort of rediscovered who they are, do you think? Are they okay with the idea that it's going to be us, and we're going to go as far as we can take this team? Because it seems like Russell's cool with it, and now that he's got his MVP, Durant's kind of been reminded that, hey, yeah, I'm pretty much unstoppable.
Well, yeah, but it's also, it's not that they changed up anything to believe in what the coach is saying. It's they started listening again, and coach brought the game plan and made it simple as he normally does. And
yes, he normally does
responded.
Make it
simple. and they responded. And that's the thing. This is the thing with players. When they go through funks, it's not about changing plays. It's not about that. It's about getting the player to get back to what he did prior to the funk. Prior to the funk, we never see any doubt. We don't see a player having struggles. It's only when they start having their struggles, they get more or less into self, and they need their coach to bring them back to reality. And that reality is, hey, Kevin, you're our guy. You're our go-to guy. We don't need you hanging your head when you miss a shot. You can't be perfect. This is not a perfect game. You just continue to shoot the ball. Hey, Russell, you know what? You continue to attack the basket. There has not been a time where Scott Brooks has said, hey, Russell, I really don't want you to attack the basket like that, because when you do that, all the defense keying on you, and I don't like that. No, he encourages that because he understands that these two players on the floor, they're dynamic with one another. It's just that they're so good at what they do, we've yet to see this type of tandem on the floor at the same time. And they have success with it. So I think it was more or less getting back to basics. Kendrick Perkins playing more, getting back into his defensive stuff. Don't pout so much, Kendrick. We still need you, baby. And then there's Serge Ibaka. Serge has to continue to knock down shots for them to honor him. Just for him. I mean, we know we're going to get it on defense with him, but sometimes he gets lost in translation.
By the way, I think you just came up with a great name for a documentary on George Clinton, Prior to the Funk. It's a great phrase you came up with there. But, yeah, you know what? A couple of guys were pretty key in this one, in that game, too, looking back, is Thabo Sefolosha, who finally showed up and gave you 14 points. And you mentioned Serge. I think he might be, when I say it's all on Durant and Westbrook, I basically mean on the offensive end. Like, those shots Sefolosha got were a result of those guys creating for him. And obviously, they combined to score 63 points. So, that is what I'm talking about on the offensive end. But on the defensive end, this team was once upon a time one of the best in the league and still very well could be. And Serge Ibaka's place in that defense is critical. And you look at what he's done against Blake so far. He's averaging Blake Griffin just 19 points on 41% shooting in the series. And with Serge Ibaka guarding him, Griffin's just 6 for 21 from the field. He's 6 of 8 against everybody else. So if everybody else wants to defend Blake, he might have a monster night. If Serge defends Blake, he might be locked down a little bit. What are you noticing, if anything, that Blake is that Serge's defense is affecting Blake? How is it just the fact that he's big and he's athletic? Or is there something else there that we're not noticing?
It's the athleticism and the fact that he matches up well with Blake as far as the defense is concerned. But you got to go back a little bit, Izzy. You go back a couple of years ago, these two got into it, kind of like the way Zach Randolph and Blake got into it with one another. It's just something about the physical, strong guys that, when they bring the fight to Blake, Blake doesn't necessarily know how to respond at all times, I think, and it's really his length. And whereas Blake can make certain moves and get by a guy like David Lee, well, this is different in this round. You're not going against, a team like that. When you have those guys that aren't able to stay with you, or if they are athletic, he could just basically jump over them and shoot the ball. I should say smaller than him, he can raise up and shoot. Well, with Serge Ibaka, he blocks shots well, and his defense is definitely, second team worthy or even first team worthy. So you're going up against an elite defender, I think Blake is now. And so now he starts to revert back to what he's comfortable with. It's not as easy for him to rely on all the things that he's worked on all summer and throughout this season to bring him into play with what Serge Ibaka is able to do on the defensive end.
Yeah, I think Blake's going to have a big game in Game 3. I just do. I feel like, the surroundings and just they're going to be calling on him. They're going to say, hey, Blake, you've got to step up for us. Chris did it in Game 1. We need you. And there's kind of a clash of history here. We got the Thunder 0-4 in Game 3s on the road when the series is tied at 1-1 since they moved to Oklahoma City. And the Clippers, who have never made it to a conference finals, and yet if they win this Game 3, history says there's a 76% chance that they're going to move on in this series and make those conference finals. So we'll see how this works out, but I do think that Blake is going to be absolutely critical in this game. I think you'll probably see him, try to do more in open space, try to do more on the break, and maybe draw a bunch of fouls, maybe get Serge in foul trouble, get him off the floor, and then have a field day against everybody else. And I mentioned Jamal Crawford having a bad game. We should note he did win Sixth Man of the Year, joining 3 other guys who have won this award twice. It was him, Kevin McHale's won it twice, Ricky Pierce won it twice, and one of my favorite names of all time, Detlef Schrempf, won it twice also. So that was pretty impressive by Jamal Crawford. He didn't get my first place vote. I just think he played too much. Like I think of Sixth Man of the Year. I do. I think of Sixth Man of the Year, I want to see as few stars as possible, and I want to see less than 30 minutes a game. And that dude didn't have either of those, so I voted for Manu number 1. So, Manu, you're welcome. You got one of your 9 first-place votes was from me. On that note, let's move on to what's actually the first game of the night, Pacers-Wizards.
He made a decision, clearly that he's going to step up, and sometimes you have just a game where the ball bounces your way or the coverage, leaves you as the open man, and sometimes you don't. We didn't call any more plays for Roy tonight than we have all series. That's the remarkable thing.
That was Frank Vogel on the remarkable performance from Roy Hibbert. He gave you 28 points. I don't know if it was Hibbert or it was a zombie version of Hibbert because we all thought he died anyway. But he's apparently alive and well and gave you 28 points. And I think the most encouraging thing about that, Bruce, was, you knew as a Pacer team that you were able to fight back coming off of 3 losses, to the Hawks. Every time they lost to the Hawks, they followed up with a win. And every time it was something different, but it never really was Roy. I mean, he was pretty good. It was okay in Game 7, right? He gave you 13 points in that game. But, he followed that up with double goose eggs, and you're thinking, okay, was that the best we're going to get? Are we never going to get a recovered Roy Hibbert? Is he in his own head? What's the deal? And then he comes out in his lowest of lowest points after that Game 1 and gives you his best game of these playoffs, his best game, heck, that I can remember him playing since the last playoffs. It's probably an overstatement there because I don't know exactly every single game he played. I didn't watch every game he played this year, but it felt like it was his best game since last year's playoffs. The thing about the Pacers is they're so unpredictable. Like, you don't know what you're going to get from night to night. But what can this possibly do as we continue to guess about the Pacers? What can this do to at least help them try to remain consistent and maybe pull off a win on the road?
This is going, I think it'll be huge, more or less just for Roy Hibbert. He's going back to the place where he played college ball at. His coach was at the last game, so I'm sure his coach is going to be at this game. And when you have, the comfort, that's all it was, I think. And it wasn't that Roy Hibbert was all of a sudden now demanding the ball. He was getting it out of the confines of what they do from time to time. Yes, they dropped it into him every now and then, but it wasn't as if they dribbled down the floor and said, hey, Roy, where you at? He got it through the flow of the offense or getting a rebound and put back or running down the court, sealing somebody down low. That's where he got a lot of his offense from. But again, as you said, you don't know which team you're going to get here. You don't know who's going to show up. And most importantly, this game wasn't one of those games where you're saying, ooh, wow, Indiana is back on track. They really handled Washington. No, it was a game where you're saying, wow, thank goodness for Roy Hibbert, because if it wasn't for Roy, they would not have won that game. So
yeah, that's
again,
exactly what I was thinking before. It was like you can feel good about Roy, but Paul George was 5 for 13. Lance Stevenson was 3 for 12. But the reason I said it was, I thought it would still be a boost was because we've at least seen Paul play well. He's had a good playoffs. We've seen Lance play well. He's had a decent playoffs, at least up and down. So the fact that you could get anything from Roy at all, and okay, at some point, 3 or 4 of those guys together are going to have a good game, And at some point, if that happens, maybe they do find a rhythm and continue to keep that up. But you didn't think that Roy could give it to you at all. So the fact that you can get away with a bad game from Paul and from Lance, that's got to be a little bit more encouraging. But also, Bruce, there's the other side of this. Washington still could have stolen this game. They had some bad possessions down the stretch of that game, time. Too. And John Wall, 2 of 13, 6 points, had a horrible game. So, how the Wizards can't possibly be discouraged going back home with a 1-1 split.
No, they're not discouraged at all, and they know they can play better. They look like the Wizards of last year in some moments of that game, as you said. Yeah. With John Wall, the decision making, the quick shots. I like the fact that they really showed a lot of character as far as how they go about things. Whenever they're down, they don't all of a sudden, okay, time to jack it up. I still think that like Bradley Beal has to be better as far as his shot selection sometimes, and take good shots. You don't have to try anything too crazy. But then carelessness played a big role in this game as well. The turnovers. There's one particular play where Bradley Beal tried to throw the ball to Nene, and David West was right there. It's like, who was that to? So I think as you get more, you watch the film session and they see how bad they played, Izzy, I think this is going to help Washington, especially with them being back home. They're going to want to avenge what they did last game against the Indiana Pacers and show that they are more than just a team that can get one victory out there and play good basketball, but they can become more consistent and do the right things in order to gain victories.
Well, I will say this much, though. They shouldn't feel great in total about their offense because Game 1 they shot less than 42% and won. In Game 2 they shot 45% and lost. So it's not like they're lighting up Indiana right now and are 1-1. So they're going to have, it's very possible they have some struggles offensively in this series, and they've got to just not cross their fingers, obviously. They're going to play defense and play it, particularly well probably, but they got to, at least hope that those guys don't all come together at once and figure it out because that Indiana Pacers defense is still pretty legit, especially when you can afford to have Roy Hibbert on the floor for 33 minutes because he's going to get his share of locked shots. He had a couple of them in that game too. If you were to pick a key, and this is kind of a trick question because I have an answer myself with some stats to back it up, but if you were to pick a key player in this Game 3 for either team, who would that be?
For either team, a key player, I'm going to go with Martell Webster. I think that he has the ability to come off the bench and give Washington something where you don't have to necessarily depend so much on Nene, Gortat, or Beal and Wall. I think he can help them coming off the bench as far as scoring is concerned. He can stretch the floor. He can stretch the defense. And then on the defensive end, he can play D as well. Not a great defender, but he's better than Kyle Korver is on Lance Stevenson.
That is actually the incorrect answer. The correct answer, the correct answer is Trevor Ariza. In Washington's wins, their 5 wins in these playoffs, he's averaging 16.8 points and shooting 61% on three-pointers. In the games they lose, he's only averaging 11 points and shooting 31% on three-pointers. So Trevor Ariza has kind of been the guy that you can tell if the Wizards have won or lost based on his offensive performance. But I'll tell you one guy whose shooting has not been particularly good, and that was John Wall. John, never really been the big-time shooter, but this year he's improved his outside shot. But so far in these playoffs, shooting less than 33% for his 16 points per game. And since the ABA-NBA merger, whenever you start a statistic by saying since the ABA-NBA merger, it's either going to be a really good statistic or a really bad one. This one's really bad. Only other guys with minimum of 5 games to average 16 points and shoot less than 33% in a playoffs. That would be John Wall so far, Jerry Stackhouse in 2002 with the Pistons, and Kevin Johnson with the Suns in 1997. So they're actually pretty good players, but not very good shooting performances. And John Wall, outside of the restricted area, is shooting 24%. So that's a pretty bad situation so far for John Wall, and yet his team is still in a great position. So if he picks it up, who knows? Maybe it's not going to be all on Trevor Ariza. That's going to do it for this edition of the NBA Lockdown Podcast. For Bruce Bowen, I'm Israel Gutierrez. Hope we ended your week on a good note, and we will talk to you again on Monday.